Good morning, everybody. Derek White with Beryllium. We're going to kick this off here in a few minutes. We'll just give everybody some time to jump on. I know there's been a lot of technical issues with the situation everybody's been working in, so we'll make sure everybody gets on before we get started. Good morning, everybody. We're going to give everybody about 30 more seconds here before we get going. I'm going to try to keep this under an hour, so I appreciate everybody for showing up. Just a couple quick things, housekeeping, question and answers. Obviously, those are very welcome during this webinar, so please submit those through the chat function. And any questions that we don't get to, we will make sure to answer afterwards and send those out to all attendees. So please submit as many questions as you can. All right. So we'll give everybody about 30 more seconds, and then we'll get going. All right, we're going to get going here. So thank you very much for joining us. This webinar is going to be recorded, and everybody who registered, whether you attended or not, will get a copy of this webinar Q&A panel discussion at a later date, probably by the end of the day or tomorrow. So again, a couple quick housekeeping pieces. There's a chat function. Please use that and submit questions as we go, and we will try to address those that we feel are the best for the whole audience. If there's specific questions or anything we don't get to, we will, as a collective group, respond back to those afterwards with source material and get those to those that attended. So please ask questions when you can. All right, so we're going to kick this off. Again, thank you for coming. We've got a great audience here today. In today's focus of this webinar, for those of you that were on our previous webinar that was more CMMC focused, we had Katie Arrington, we had Wayne Bowline, some others from the CMMC side answered a lot of questions and very much focused on the updates on the CMMC side. This webinar was going to take place as an in-person panel event for that event, which is now obviously virtual. So today we're going to do it as a specific solutions panel for DFARS and NIST 800-171. So any CMMC questions and stuff, that's not our place to answer them. We are specifically talking about the requirements, and we'll get into that in a minute. So those that are joining us today, I'm going to read through this real quickly. We do have a great group of panelists, and in no particular order. We've got Joe Stuntz, Director of Federal and Platform at Virtru. And Virtru is a data protection company founded in 2012 in Washington, D.C., focused on building tools and technology on top of the trusted data format. An Office of the Director of National Intelligence approved a data protection standard developed by the Virtru CTO and co-founder in his time with DoD. From email and file protection into IoT data and secure analytics, Virtru focuses on protecting data at the point of creation and maintaining control wherever the data is shared or stored. And Joe leads the federal and platform team at Virtru after 10 years in the government as a civilian and contractor, ending up at the White House Office of Management and Budget, where he worked on the federal CIO and federal CISO teams from 2015 to 2017. We've got Ezra Graziano, Federal Account Executive at Duo, and I apologize for the paper shuffling here. This has been a challenge here. So Duo is now part of Cisco and is a FedRAMP authorized multi-factor authentication vendor, helping DoD mission partners effectively secure their networks. Mission partners can leverage Duo to meet their NIST 800-171 requirements while protecting CUI applications for cloud, on-prem, and mobile. We've got Patrick Colantonio, Director of Sales at Nectar Labs. And Nectar Labs is a cybersecurity software company dedicated to providing affordable DFARS NIST 800-171 compliance solutions to the small business market. As their company's founder originated as a project team within a prime defense contractor, they know firsthand the struggles of small businesses. Our platform, or their platform, excuse me, combines SIEM activating, alerting, inventory, vulnerability scanning into a single solution, providing you with a global view of your company's network. We've also got Misha Smith, Vice President of Marketing at InfoPro IQ. InfoPro IQ is a general awareness and information security training platform for those looking to increase their cybersecurity maturity with training their people in their first line of defense, which also includes a phishing simulation tool, and we'll talk more about that later. We've got Eric Power, Director of Strategic Initiatives and Equity Partner at Beryllium. And Beryllium is a third-party information security firm that specializes in DoD contractors, small, big, and large, or medium, excuse me, and a lot of focus on NIST 800-171 and along the quick track solution, which we'll get into in a few minutes. We also have Brian Emerson, owner and operator of Point North Networks. He has been, they have been providing cloud hosting and IT managed services since 2005. Point North has developed and implemented both on-prem and hosted technology solutions for companies such as 3M, Best Buy, Carlson Companies, etc. And they hold several certifications in IT technologies and have won excellence awards and hosted services awards over the years. They have many experiences around their IT and hosting teams. The logical choice for the solution that we're going to talk about on the IT portion of QuickTrack, and a big focus on NIST 800-171 enclaving. All right, so thank you everybody. I'm Eric White. I am Director of Sales and Marketing at Beryllium InfoSec Collaborative, also an equity partner, and I'll be moderating today, so any questions, please send them in. I will get them to our panelists. Okay, so the reason that we're here, again, is to talk about solutions for DFARS 7012 and NIST 800-171. These are the requirements that have been laid out for the last handful of years that those contractors looking to achieve CMMC certification, let's say at a level 3, and don't want to be seen as a vulnerability to the DoD supply chain, that's what we're focused on today. From the CMMC Level 1 and some of the basic requirements, there are going to be a lot of resources out there at some point in the future for you. That's not what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about a managed security maturity solution or process. So from a small business, medium-sized business, large business, if you've been chasing and working on compliance with DFARS 252.204-7012, this has been the road and the journey that you've been on. Now, you may not be very far, or you may be way down the path because you've got time and resources available. It's a very daunting task, and over the years, I think every business realizes, specifically in the climate that we're in right now, is that being overworked and understaffed is a huge problem, specifically when it comes to requirements around your business, not just cybersecurity requirements, but all of your requirements to do contracting with the DoD. So going back a couple of years, Beryllium InfoSec Collaborative was doing a lot of gap analysis, risk assessment, controls effectiveness reviews, and consulting with DoD contractors looking to achieve these requirements. And the feedback quickly became, wow, this is great, I know where I stand, this is good, and whether they're self-attesting already or utilizing us as their third party, you know, the overstaffed and an undervalued portion of their business because they just don't have the resources became, well, what do we do? Like, how do we get this all done? It's great to have a plan, but what good is a plan if you can't execute on it? So we thought that's obviously a great point, and as a security function in the business, we can't do that for them, right? That has to be done by technology and IT functions for the business. And so what happened is that we said, well, let's go shopping. We went out, we found great resources, great companies, and some not so great, but great companies of people that want to help small businesses. They spend their time in the DoD. They have great solutions that are easy to use, easy to manage, and more importantly, they're affordable, and that's a big deal. So with that, we kind of went out and built their shopping list and said, here's some great resources for you that you absolutely need, and we can make the introduction to you. We don't get paid to resell them, but they solve the problem that you're looking for. Give them a call, set that up, vet them out, do whatever. That was also very ideal, very helpful for a lot of clients, but then the feedback still became, I have 15, 16, 20 vendors that I have to implement. Who in my organization is responsible for managing that? And those relationships have to stay in place. You look at the term on CMMC Level 3, for example, is managed. This is a managed security solution that has to stay in place at all times. That becomes a very difficult task for anybody. A lot of small businesses don't have that role identified, so therefore are they going to add somebody? How is that going to go? So that's why we're here today. We're going to talk about a way that we use these collaboration, and we call them core collaborators. We're going to introduce everybody from we just talked about. We're going to talk about their vendors, but how we can do this in a different way. Okay, but before we do that, these are the kind of mindsets that we have to think about. There's technical requirements. This is a screenshot right here from a publicly this is a public document for CMMC with the domains. There's 17 domains, and that grew from 14, which was under the NIST 171 guidelines. And technical requirements are tools, technology, things that you can buy, purchase, implement that keep controlled unclassified information both secure, the confidentiality of it, while it's in transit, it controls that information. But it's not everything. The technology piece is roughly 70%. So even if you could buy all of that and you had all the resources and the time to do that, you still don't have a full solution. Because now at that point, you have to focus on the non-technical requirements. So now we're talking about things like, awareness training, incident response, assessing the business, media protection, physical requirements, but really getting into why do you use this technology stack that you have invested in, and how are you using it? Is it meeting the level of the law? And are you showing that you're actually providing good cybersecurity maturity by having the processes in place to go along with the practices that you put into place with your business? Okay, so from that aspect, technical and non-technical are two different requirements, and that's how we are going to talk about the solution that we're here together as a collaborative. So what if you had every single piece of the technology and technical requirements in one place? We did that. And that's where we're going to talk about the subject matter experts on this call and where that fits and how that works and why we chose to do it that way. But also that non-technical requirement side is the programmatic aspect of the solution. So now we can talk about things like your policy and procedure of the technology that you're utilizing. System security plan, which is a live living document, your plan of action and milestone, which is technically still available to you to use, but if you're looking to achieve CMMC Level 3 certification in the future, you're no longer allowed to have open items in your POAM of NIST 171. So that's what we're talking about today, is getting those things done so that you can mature forward, incident response, etc. That becomes a security function and a business function, not a technology function for your compliance program. So how do we do that? Quick Track. Quick Track is the solution, the programmatic full solution to these requirements from NIST 171 and DFARS 252.204-7012. And it's an affordable, practical, and secure way of doing it. Now, you see the logo on the screen, and the question is going to become, well, why these vendors? Why these logos? Why these people that are on this panel today? And it's because they are experts in what they do. We chose to work collaboratively with them versus against them, because that's not going to solve any problems, everybody fighting, right? It's working together and making sure that we're meeting the separation of function, but keeping the requirements in place and you moving your business forward, right? So putting things into place and plugging stuff in and then forgetting about it in 2 years is not going to happen anymore. It can't happen. And why? Well, we have a national security play. I think we can all agree on that. This is about keeping our data out of other people that want it. And not just an adversary standpoint, China's and Russia's of the world, but how about your competition? You don't want to give up your integrity of your data and your business and your innovation to somebody else, because now you lose your competitive edge. But what if you had an affordable way and a practical way of doing business as usual, getting your requirements in place, and now you have this really cool innovation that you want to sell to the DoD, and you have everything in place. That's a competitive advantage. We want you to get there. But more importantly, we want to keep that innovation of the small business and the DoD supply chain active, alive, and strong. It's the American dream, okay? So as we get into this whole conversation in the question and answers, we're going to spend a good amount of time on that today. Again, I emphasize, if we can, keep the questions about the CMMC. You know, that's for the CMMC accreditation body board website. That's where the information is going to be public to everyone. We're here to talk about solutions. So if you have questions about, you've been diligently working on this for 2, 3, 4 years, and you've got a team in place, and it's about getting over that hump, awesome, you've got resources right here. If you're looking at this as I haven't done much and I need to get my stuff in a row because I know I've got a lot of work to do, we got solutions for you here too, absolutely. You might be new to DoD work too. So, you know, the big focus on CMMC is going to be new business contracts, right? Well, maybe you want to get into the DoD because you have an innovative, cool product that you want to sell. Well, you can't even do that unless you have these things in place. You can from a basic standpoint, but let's take that next level. Let's go further and be better. And one of the things that we're really focused on now, specifically with a go, no-go decision when it comes to CMMC, is that mindset of we have to stop believing that we know we have, or excuse me, we have to stop believing that we have these things in place and start knowing that we have these things in place. That's the documentation. That's the proof that you're keeping this information where it needs to be. So with that, that's my little spiel. I'm going to kick it up to some questions. So from a chat function aspect, please submit questions if you can. I'm going to turn my video off so the focus can be on our panelists, and I'll give everybody about 30 seconds to submit some questions, and then we'll go from there.
A couple that came in already.
All right. Okay, so So let's get the questions again. Keep submitting them. If they're having audio issues, I apologize for that. We seem to have some people call in on the mobile or on the audio piece from your phone. If you can, it seems to work better. But we'll jump right in here. So first question. This looks like for Joe. Let's see. So why did Virtru join? It's a two-part question. Why did Virtru join the collaborative? And how does this integrate with existing solutions that people have?
Sure. So first, thank you everyone for attending. I think this is critically important and sort of why I wanted to get involved, why Virtru wanted to get involved. You know, first of all, coming from a government background and seeing some of the challenges in acquisitions or in the security of acquisitions, including an effort to write a supply chain policy, which failed in 2015. So I'm glad that things are moving forward despite me not getting the policy out the door when I was in government. But nonetheless, Virtru joined the collaborative because we get a lot of questions. One, we're in DC, and two, most of us have federal backgrounds, at least at sort of at a certain level or a certain history. And we don't have all the answers, right? We are an encryption and access control company. That is what we do. That's what we are experts in. We don't do a number of pieces on here that are required. And so for us to, you know, either we lie and say we do everything, and that's not a great look for anybody, or we say, you know, we throw up our hands, you know, just buy us, and then good luck on the rest of it. And that really wasn't going to be sufficient. That doesn't actually help anybody. So when we got in touch with the collective, the Quick Track team, we thought, here's a group of people actually trying to solve a problem that's not focused just on the Fortune 50, but that's focused on the supply chain. which is critical to national security, as you mentioned, Derek, but also sort of critical to the functioning of the economy, honestly. So Virtru is very excited about this opportunity to do what we do best and collaborate with others that do other things that we certainly do not. And so on that point, one of our core values and beliefs is that we should integrate with existing stuff, right? At Virtru, we are one of our deployment models is through a plugin into Microsoft Outlook or G Suite for emails and files, right? You already have an email solution that you like. You already have an identity that you like, right? You have a username and password and multi-factor, hopefully through Duo in this circumstance for your email. So why would you want to create a username and password for a portal-based solution or for a secure email solution, right? So at Virtru, we leverage your existing email identity, whether that's Microsoft or Google. We have some backups for those that are still on Lotus Notes for anyone out there. But in general, we want to leverage your existing user experience, your existing identity, because that's the way we're going to be successful. We are not user experience designers, although we do have a really good team on that to make sure everything works well. But we are, it sort of goes back to why we joined the collective. We know what we're good at. We're good at encryption and access control. And so as many ways as we can leverage that while relying on experts in other areas, that's what we want to do.
Cool. Thank you, Joe. Appreciate that. Question for Patrick at Nectar. I am logging and manually reviewing logs on all of my assets currently. Am I meeting compliance?
Yeah, so in terms of that question, that's a good one because obviously in terms of getting in logs and doing it manually, it is definitely a way. In terms of is that the best way? Probably not. I mean, if you have a procedure in place, you're adhering to it, you're doing that, it's going to be tedious. For the NIST, that is a way to go. Trending towards CMMC, it's going more towards automation. Correlation is key. Reporting is key. It really comes down to when there are things happening within your environment, you want to make sure that if it happens, do you know? Are you able to respond to it? Are you able to dive in, find something? So correlating things in a central way across all of your assets is going to be crucial. And of course, if you're able to do that in-house, leveraging a platform, that's great. If you have a team doing that, that's awesome as well. It really comes down to making sure as well from a log retention standpoint, DFARS requires you to keep it for a length of time. 90 days is bare minimum. Recommend maybe 180 or a lot more. But also it comes down to getting eyes and getting responsiveness. So if your team's able to handle that, awesome. If you need to offshore that, if you need someone else, a team such as a solution to operations center or a cyber team to assist you with that, that's also a great way as well. And that's kind of the theme that we're talking about here, because obviously all the different solutions that are on the call today are independently, awesome. They stand up, they're leading in their industry, but combined together, there's also a power in that, and it really comes down to your resource utilization and whether you think that your company is best suited to do that, or if you need some expert insight and management of that for the NIST and now the CMMC coming out.
Awesome. Thank you, Patrick. Next question, this one's for Eric Power of Beryllium. Is QuickTrack an operational platform or just a collaborative effort of complementary services and solutions? This is a good one.
Yeah, excellent question. I saw that one come in live, so thanks for sending that. So the best way to think about it is, yes, it is an operational platform from the front end, and our approach is it really starts with scoping. So to answer that fully, if you think about some of the phone calls that all of our organizations receive, and some of the folks that are on today that are solution providers as well, I'm sure these phone calls are very, very common. A call will come in, hey, we've got DFARS in our contract. How do we respond to this? How do we get these controlled in place? So if you put the solution together from a technical aspect and you offer an operational platform for people to work on, do their everyday work with those controls in place, and we can solve 70% of those requirements under one roof, We want that to be ease of use for most users within the business. That was the purpose and the development of QuickTrack. So from a login standpoint, and we will be doing a live demo here in the very near future to show what this looks like from a user standpoint, but from today to kind of visualize that, our users and our clients will have access to that, and when they log in, it's like a typical day at the office with a couple of other login changes to a 12-second login process. So we figure out first who in the organization is touching CUI at a digital level. I think a lot of organizations over the last decade and maybe even 5 years or so really think in terms of endpoints and people, instead of really thinking about what is it that they're looking to solve and what is this requirement asking of us. Well, a lot of it comes down to access control, and a lot of it comes down to simple business processes. And if you remove cybersecurity from that mindset, it becomes a little bit holds a little bit less mysticism around it. So if we think about who's touching it at a digital level, and we can define what CUI is, and help that organization think about what their data flows look like, we can essentially pull them off their regular network, and when they are working on projects that are related to DoD and or CUI handling or sensitive information, it's a place where they can work on, store, share, transmit that type of information with those controls, so they don't have to think about that while they're doing the day-to-day function. So just to kind of walk through what that looks like outside of what that means to being not only a platform for people to use, and this is why we're working with the great folks that we are. In there, we've got the proper encryption, we've got our multi-factor authentication, we've got our separation of functions between Point North Networks on the IT side and Beryllium as the security function. We've got our training and awareness, and we've got our SIM and logging and alerting. We've got that all going on behind the scenes, so the client has one point of contact to manage. At that point, what we do as Beryllium is we're going to work with our clients, provide that policy procedure documentation. We're going to work with them in structuring their incident response plan. We're going to sit there, a lot of our calls, we do monthly calls with our clients, so we're going to sit there and talk to them about, hey, we're going after, there's an RFP that's out there, how do we answer this for our cybersecurity requirements? Things like that. And all the way down to, hey, we're going through an audit. Can you fly out here and be present, or can you join us on a phone call and represent us and speak intelligently to how we're protecting this information. So in all, it's a program that comes with that platform, and then that support from, as we discussed earlier, that 30% of it being administrative and really needing that maybe that subject matter guide. We'll provide that on the back end. So our goal is to make it a single point of contact and serve as that platform as a SaaS operation. So thanks for the great question.
Cool, thank you. Kicking this one over to Ezra. It says, you mentioned that Duo's an authentication broker, that's in quotes. Can you please describe what that means and describe how you integrate with applications? This is a great question because this is why we work with Duo and the Fed team within the QuickTrack solution specifically.
Hey, Derek, thank you, and appreciate you having me and all the attendees that joined. Yeah, and great question as well. So the way Duo fits in as audience may have heard, Duo being an authentication broker at some point, and that really refers to just being a kind of agile service that allows you to tie in different authenticators to different applications, to different user groups. So it really has, as a, from the technology perspective, as an API, being able to insert itself in the workflow and kind of prompt that user right for that second factor. It gives you the agility to leverage different types of authenticators, and that could also mean meeting different levels of compliance as well when it comes to what your goals are in certification. So, I don't want to, I can take up the entire call kind of talking about the different ways we do that, but from a high level kind of 30,000 foot view, that's really what that's referring to. Thanks, Derek.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Ezra. Let's see here. I know there's a good one. I apologize. Where did that go? We have a question. I want to make sure, again, we got a lot of questions coming in, so thank you. Let's see here. How about Brian, Point North Networks? Let's kick one over to you. This is a good question here. It has to do with, does the QuickTrack solution mean I do not need my IT staff anymore? Great question.
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Dirk. The Quick Track environment is it's a full technology stack that basically allows you to run your apps in your line of business and maintain your CUI integrity using all the controls that are behind the scenes, including all the great people that are on the panelist forum right now. You know, Duo, Nectar, all that, Virtru. But with that, we are supporting the users in the environment as your IT staff. So we're a full service help desk to answer any questions that come in for any technology needs that are in the environment. However, we're not a competing entity with your current IT support staff, or that be outsourced or in-house. As a matter of fact, we work best with an existing IT staff to help with on-site stuff as well as what's going on in the Quick Track environment. So it's kind of a dual answer. Yes, we're your IT staff for Quick Track, but not necessarily for your on-prem infrastructure.
Super, thank you. Let's go back to Eric on this one, because we get this one a lot. So how many in this group work on issues with physical security?
Oh, good question. Yeah, I saw that one come through as well. So no, that's a really, really good question. So just to kind of continue the thought from earlier, the process of what a Quick Track client looks like. So just think about this in terms of onboarding, provisioning those accounts. Now that we've got the technology portion in a place for people to work safely and we're getting used to that environment, we're going to schedule that on-site assessment. In most cases, we'll send 2 assessors, depending on the client size, and we're going to come out and we're going to attest to the physical security of, and to meet the controls and the requirements found within the 171, and that'll be accompanied by the rest of the information based on the environment of the data being hosted and the technology that goes with it. Together, that report turns into a deliverable, and we're attesting to the overall security posture of the organization. From there, we'll offer remediation guidance. We're talking about doors access, we're talking about logins, check-ins, accompanying chaperones on site, travelers if it's a production floor, a lot of those issues from a production floor or manufacturing type setting. And if it turns into other type of physical security requirements, if we're dealing with a client that has more than just a DFARS clause that they're adhering to, if there's other lines of work that they're doing, we have partners within our collaborative that can help with that as well. We work with Kieran Group very heavily with regards to physical security when it takes some remediation efforts to get people up to the correct kind of posture. But great question, and back to the whole mindset of being a collaborative. It's part of the process, it's part of that program, and we're going to deal with them individually as they come.
Cool, thank you, Eric. Misha, got one here that came in regards to training, and what level of training does my organization need from a general InfoSec training awareness standpoint, which I talked about a little bit in the intro. Can you touch on what Innopro does and how you guys solve that portion of the collaborative?
Yeah, absolutely. So from a compliance standpoint, it can be a little tricky because there is some level of gray area around, okay, training, but what kind of training? So when we say cybersecurity awareness training, information security awareness training, it can mean a lot of different things. And so our focus was, yes, there might be gray area, but for us, let's actually provide a solution that's going to educate employees and ultimately reduce risk. So that's the goal. We want to empower employees to take training, take positive action, on security threats like phishing or social engineering threats, things like that. So through Innopro IQ, we provide an e-learning platform, hosted all kinds of different awareness training topics, including ones that are just as relevant to us now working from home or us just in our daily lives, like just safe security practices on things like social networking or connecting to public Wi-Fi, which surprisingly are very relevant right now, and working from home, security best practices. So that's been a big leap for us in focusing on information security training that is relevant to you within the workplace, but also at home, in your personal lives, and just overall general security. So I guess long story short, there are not a lot of definitive, bullet points around what exactly awareness training should look like from a compliance standpoint. So for us, the focus was just creating a value proposition and having valuable cybersecurity training that did ultimately reduce risk.
Awesome. Yep.
And great points, Misha. And I think one question that flew in right after you started wrapping up there, from a training aspect, I mean, we think in terms of a few years ago, people were thinking in terms of checking the box, and where we couldn't accomplish something, we're going to throw it on our POEM. So when we think about QuickTrack is built for a specific type of client that has specific needs, but just think about the components within. For instance, if you're missing a certain piece, from the non-technical side, a few years ago, you could handle your low-hanging fruit, for instance, and go after, okay, we're going to work on MFA and we're going to work on training. And to have a modular-based training and to be able to check that box, but also not be that government-y type dry training, that's why it was such a perfect partner for us. But if the one question that just came in regarding CUI training, so as I mentioned earlier, there are digital CUI handlers. We're going to define those people when we're thinking about scoping who needs to go into this environment, have access to it. When we're on site, we're going to provide that training as well, specific CUI training for those folks that are handling it, and then obviously bringing people into the room of the organization to talk about the basics of what it is, how to identify it, so they can start changing and having a paradigm shift for dealing with data separately than just regular data, very similar to a PCI type mindset. But it really is beneficial to have both that separated out with the training modules that Interpro has, so people can have a little bit of separation of understanding what type of data they are handling.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah, and I'll say too, just to add that, training is important. You can have great security around your CUI, but if the rest of your business gets taken down with the ransomware attack, which we're seeing a huge uptick, obviously, with a lot of remote workers, that's a big risk in your business, so we can't have that. And that goes for taxpayers and DoD supply chain in general. We just can't have that. So. Good answer. Thank you, Misha and Eric.
Yeah, real quickly, there's a lot of really good questions coming in, and as Derek mentioned earlier, we'll definitely collectively we'll get answers to some of these very specific ones. And we'll definitely get those out to the group, because these are some great questions, and these are the kind of things that we're happy to everyone's asking.
Yes. Okay. Cool. Here's one, Eric. While this is a good one for you too, I think, and maybe Brian too. But how does QuickTrack deal with third-party engineering products like SolidWorks PDM?
I'll start, and Brian, how about you take it from there? Great question. Again, so we have a traditional setup function, and part of our process is we're going to ask our clients, what types of softwares are you using? We have to put them through their vulnerability tests. What are we going to allow in, what we are not going to allow in, if it's just authenticating for a license versus, for instance, just proper vendor management. Are we going to check to see who we're working with? Are their clouds FedRAMP approved? Are they not? What kind of compensating controls can we build around that? SolidWorks is a very common, as you can all imagine, regarding engineering firms, architectural, manufacturing, and other type of formats. So we do have the ability to provide that type of support, and we have a QuickTrack traditional, like as an SMB, and then we have a hybrid that we can build up and support. But Brian, do you want to take that a little bit further?
Yeah, for sure, Eric. So you kind of hit on there a little bit. We built QuickTrack kind of with scalability and flexibility in mind, knowing that there's going to be a lot of different applications and deployments. Manufacturing specifically, SolidWorks has been a big part of QuickTrack, and we've been able to implement it pretty successfully, from being able to spin up license servers and getting down into the CAD aspect of SolidWorks, delivering high-end graphics performance using virtual GPUs, even to the point where it's even been a little bit better performance issue than even on a local desktop. So yeah, for SolidWorks and manufacturing and custom applications, we've certainly built that to accommodate those types of environments.
Perfect. Thank you, Brian. Thank you. Let's see. Let's get one over to, I got an Ezra one here. Ezra, Duo. Does Duo require any on-prem or local components to perform a multi-factor event, 2FA event?
Hey, Derek, thanks. And another great question. Appreciate that. And Duo's a FedRAMP service, so we're a cloud-based multi-factor tool, and ultimately it's mostly cloud. There's one on-prem component. If you leverage our SSO, that would sit on the DMZ and function as a auth proxy ultimately, right? So that would be the one lightweight kind of component that would be necessary in the event you were to leverage our a single sign-on capability. Other than that, Duo's kind of really foundation has been a strictly cloud-based service, and it's not really, while we support some offline workstation logons that have been kind of very prevalent in the DoD space and from the supply chain aspect, it's will remain a cloud service just to make sure it's agile and easy to deploy and user-friendly from that aspect too. So it also keeps costs down as well, right? So it makes our service very, very low to maintain from that aspect as well. So so thanks, Derek.
Well, thank you, Ezra. Appreciate that. Patrick, one for you. It's a little general, so please dive into this however you want. But specific to a SIEM solution like Nectar appears to provide, can you tell us about the difference between what Nectar provides within the QuickTrack solution and standalone versus, say, some other options?
Sure. So in terms of where we really fit into things, I mean, so our focus is this market specifically. We do have some customers that are more commercially oriented, but for the most part, we're tackling the NIST and the CMMC head on. So that's allowed us to do some custom stuff, do some very specific targeted things in collaboration with Brian and his team and how it's deployed in QuickTrack. But in general, the main focus that we aspire to achieve with Nectar is its ease of use, but then also its integration capability with different platforms and really targeting it towards small business where it can be stood up in a matter of days in terms of getting reports, getting integration stood up, but then also in terms of how we provide it, whether it be a hardware-based appliance that we do have built to meet the storage and the encryption of data at rest capabilities, those types of things. That's really the focus where there's a lot of SIEM providers, there's a lot of SOC providers, but we really aspire to make sure that when you ring us up and have anything to ask about NIST, DFARS, or now CMMC, we're going to be able to answer that and how our product meets those objectives and walk you through that. We want to make sure that when you're filling out your system security plan, when you're filling out or you're having people ask you specific things about how the platform is meeting those objectives, we're able to do that. And some other companies, they generally are commercially oriented and might not be able to be as specific to this framework. So,
cool.
Thank
you, Patrick. Yep, no, appreciate that. Good question. So again, just to kind of reiterate here, we're getting a lot of questions. Some of them are very, I think, specific to the organization asking. So we will get to those afterwards, but in order to answer as many questions as we can that are for the intended whole audience, we'll dive through these. So thank you for submitting those. Appreciate that. Here's one. I'm gonna ask this one or read this one out loud, and then I'll just jump in and kind of give a quick answer so that we don't spend a ton of time on this one, but it is important. So for NIST 171, if a subcontractor has not received anything marked CUI and can't determine whether or not it qualifies as CUI, is the subcontractor responsible for handling the information as CUI? This makes a big difference in how we evaluate our systems to NIST 171 or whether we know if we are handling CUI or not. This is a very, very common question, and this is one of those very obviously important aspects of everything that we're talking about, because we are focusing on the solution side today. And if you put a solution around your entire business to meet these specific requirements, it's going to become expensive, it's going to become challenging for just about anybody. So when it comes to determining CUI, this is one of those areas where we anticipate the CMMC will help identify that, because the data is going to dictate the level of requirement. So one way that we kind of answer it, again, this is just our personal opinion, is If you're doing something that is specific for a DoD contract, and that's why you're responding to that information, and you want to continue to be part of that supply chain, and if you're just making a cap for a pen and you can sell it to anybody, that's a different story. But your innovation, your product, your bread and butter, if it is specifically if they're using you instead of somebody else, then you should treat that as valuable information. Whether it's CUI or not is going to be up to your contracting officer and in your prime at the end of the day when they roll the CMMC requirements out, whether you'll have to be say a 3 versus a 1. But this is a maturity model that they're talking about. They put the CMMC into place so that you as a subcontractor or prime contractor are maturing your defenses against attacks on this information. So you might only need to be a level 1 today, let's say, but in 3 years, who's to say that they're not going to move that forward and say, we're maturing the whole supply chain. Take what you've done and add to it. So if you've had the DFARS 7012 clause in your contract called out, you should be working on this. You should have been, finished this essentially, but now that's what they're giving you time to do. Get that done. Treat it as CUI. And when it comes down to scoping information, that's a conversation we can have with you as Beryllium. That's kind of one of the functions that we serve at, as Eric mentioned earlier, is identifying that scope. That is a big piece of this. Fewer amount of people touching this information, way easier it is to put information security controls around that. So good question, and I want to make sure that we talked about that.
And on that note, just real quickly, in regards to scope, let's think in terms of what do we want in scope in our business. And a lot of folks, when they're starting down their path of building out remediation pathways forward, there's an assumption that we need to wrap the entire business into this. And as we can all imagine, the longer the business has been in existence, the longer the business has been working on DoD contracts, even expired contracts that aren't currently being performed or serviced, there's still a lot of cleanup that needs to be done in order to meet your obligation. So if we think in terms of shrinking that scope, continuously shrinking scopes to, I think is where you're getting at, Derek, I think companies are going to be able to fast track their plan and pathway forward and also make sure they're not missing anything along the way.
All right, well, good question here I'll kick this one over to Joe because I think a couple of us could maybe answer this, but what measures are required to enable storage of ITAR data on a company laptop, specifically the minimum requirements? And maybe, Brian, you jump in on this, but I'm going to send this one to Joe because I know your background in ITAR is
There's a couple ITAR things in here, so this will be a good one.
Yeah, and it depends a little bit on the type of organization. Everyone's implementation needs are different based on the type of data and based on the nature of the business, right? Whether you're traveling internationally with that laptop, whether, so I'll sort of stay high level and then feel free to send me something afterwards. And I will be happy to go in depth on this because it's something I've spent a lot of time on. But very quickly, if you're not traveling with the laptop, there is a new ITAR rule that came out in late March that said if you use end-to-end encryption, you can store ITAR data, or if you expose ITAR data even to, say, a cloud server somewhere, not in this laptop use case, of course, but if it's end-to-end encrypted, that cloud server touching that cloud server is not an export event. So basically, if you're not traveling with it and it is just staying locally and you have access control to sort of who has that laptop and who has credentials for that laptop, it will depend on the data, in general, but I don't want to give you a blanket set of prescriptive controls because I think it does depend on this particular use case and that laptop itself. But at a very high level, access control, and I don't just say that as we work in access control, but that's really the main thing, right? Are you sure that only the appropriate people have access to that laptop and that data? And two, encrypting it is a helpful way in general to enforce that access control. And I will turn it over to other folks who can go into more of the specifics.
Thanks, Joe. Yeah, that's a good one. So I've got another one here. This is a good question. This one comes up a lot too. And I'm going to say probably Patrick, maybe, and Brian, you can jump in too. But does QuickTrack support DFARS flowdowns C through G?
Yeah, so I saw that and I wanted to answer that directly as I have a copy of the DFARS in front of me so we can kind of answer that. It's really Brian's realm. in terms of how he has everything set up. But C through G on the DFARS specifically really gets into some key areas that are addressed by QuickTrack. So cyber incident reporting requirements, properly reporting cyber incidents, which is one thing to report, make sure that all the data is collected and submitted, but it also gets into with D, E, and F and G, providing malicious software as evidence, as detected and reported in the incident, media preservation and protection. So it gets into that log retention topic, but also gets into preservation of systems and system images and things like that. And then obviously rounding out that those requirements are being able to provide and additional information that information is accessed from a forensic analysis standpoint, and just getting cyber incident damage assessment activities, things like that. So I just kind of want to outline those different points and have Brian speak to generally how QuickTrack is checking off all those objectives with how everything is set up.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Patrick. So the QuickTrack solution is really designed around all the different 110 controls that goes into NIST 800-171. So not only from a technical aspect are we meeting those requirements, you know, from SIEM logging, from VLANs, from endpoint protection, but we've also went through the entire control set from a policy and procedure and administrative side too as well. So even we have SIEM and anything like that, we also have incident response and policies and procedures and risk assessments that go into that. So for sure that flows down into those controls because we're held up to the same, you know, being that solution, we're held up to the entire control set, both technical and administratively, that goes into all that. So for sure that all flows down into the environment if you're using it.
Awesome, thanks, Brian. So I've got a question coming up here too, and this should be addressed. You know, has anyone heard of any timeline shifts for compliance due to COVID? That's a great question. Obviously, we're all in a totally different life than we were a month or two ago. I'm going to emphasize again, keep up to date with the CMMC accreditation body website. They have made Kitty Arrington has made some comments about a potential delay here and there of maybe some round of certifications, but the fact is, you know, we shouldn't be waiting for the last minute. We should be getting this stuff into place. But they are going to figure it out. And this COVID stuff is going to be important even more so that we have people working on devices and environments that aren't secure. So again, the only thing we're going to answer there is focus on the requirements. And at that point, then you can adapt to any sort of delays or changes of anything moving forward.
Hey, Derek, real quickly on that question. One thing that I think ties really well into it is another question that came in. There's a couple private questions that came in. One of them is due to very similar to, you know, these timelines. We've had these questions. I'm sure we've all heard them that are on the solution providing side, the assessor side. You know, essentially, when are the sheriffs going to show up on the road? When are audits going to begin? I mean, we've had clients that have been audited by DCMA, FBI, other agencies. But really, I think what it comes down to is the last 2 years, and to think about why the CMMC exists and why self-attestation wasn't working and why they're moving in the direction of certification, very similar to manufacturing standards. It's a really different game where you go from self-attestation to pass-fail. So as we move forward, let's think about in terms of, we got to think about everything, because it's not as simple as, for instance, a lot of people forget about, let's talk a little bit about encryption and then multi-factor authentication. You know, especially in a production environment, much of the defense industrial base is made up of manufacturers or the production of some sort of end product that goes on the front lines for that matter. But we have to think about if CUI is traveling, you know, within the network and to our ERPs and through our CRMs, you know, we have to protect that data just as we were just by upgrading our Microsoft license to, hey, we have encryption, or hey, we're using an MFA. If that MFA can't fit between that and everything, are we prepared to answer to those audits or go through that test? Because those are the things that we're going to be looking at. And if you think in the terms of DCMA types audit. We're looking at question format, we're looking at testing, we're looking at a really focused process. Does my paperwork, my system security plan, does that match what I'm actually doing? Does that match what I actually have in place? And when I interview my employees, are they actually doing those things? And that's a very basic level, but I really want to make sure I touch on that, because I think a lot of people, and this is why we love working with the clients that we do. The clients we work with are ahead of this, they've been ahead of this. The last piece to this, Katie Arrington said last week that 285,000 of the 300,000 defense industrial base businesses will only need level 1, and that number seems high. Do you believe this makes sense, and only 50 to 60,000 defense industrial base organizations receiving CUI? You know, that's an excellent point, and we talk about that internally quite often. Without speculation as to where those numbers are coming from, because I don't want to go down that path today, I do want to think in terms of what happened 2 years ago. You know, some will estimate, and I'll be conservative on this, that 80% of contracts right now through the DoD contain the DFARS clause within it. And we know why that existed. It was a very blanket statement. It's a broad brush stroke to just make sure that, hey, we can protect our end as a prime all the way down to our lower tiers. Just as that was a broad canvas, I think the first start on the CMMC side, there's really, I think the recognition back in June and why they're rolling it out as slowly and methodically as they have, doing a great job with those working groups, is because they understand a lot of people haven't done much of anything. Just to start with level 1 with basic cyber hygiene is a great place to get folks, and then they're going to make that correction over the course of time. Because I do agree with you in your statement, because we work with a lot of folks that do have CUI.
Awesome, thank you. So we have 5 minutes left, and as much as we'd love to stay on and keep asking questions, this is a very unique time for everybody. We want to be very aware of everyone's day of moving on. So we'll do maybe one more final question. I just want to touch on a couple in 5-word answers before we kick one final question off. I'm also going to change the slide for those that have additional questions. To make things easier, we have a lot of people on this webinar. You know, reach out to me. I will get you in contact with the right panelist that was on this, the right resource, and we'll start talking about this stuff. So we want to start knowing that you have this stuff in place and you know where you're at so that you can accomplish your goals, okay? So a question real quick, there's a talk about DFARS rule change. What are the rule changes? That's coming, so just stay tuned to that. Again, pay attention to the websites. There's public information that will be available. We're not going to comment on that, but yes, there is a DFARS rule change coming. I want to say too, there's a good question on here, and I'll just real quickly touch on this, and we can have this conversation later around the assessment side and the controls effectiveness side, and having a penetration test done. There's some very broad labels on some of that, and there's dangerous paths to go there on costs and what are you getting. So we want to be very aware of that, and as you mature, this is obvious, if you look into the future levels past level 3, they talk about testing the effectiveness of your managed security. That's going to be a big thing to be focused on for the future, right? So that it's always in place. So give us a call, you know, send me an email. We'll talk more about that in depth. We'll answer that afterwards too for everybody, but that's a good question. So 3 minutes to go. One more question. Let's see here. Let's do a good one here. Let's do this one. This is a good one. Eric, I'll kick this. Anybody can jump in here, but we'll start with Eric. So when it comes to working with an on-site portion, and we don't know a lot about the auditing and all that kind of stuff, but talk a little bit about, I think what they're asking here is the audit format and the proof that then helps with the policy and procedure and the actual documentation of the fact that you're using something like the Quick Track solution with all these vendors.
Yeah, that's a great point. So let's just forget for a moment that Quick Track exists. Let's go back to traditional approaches to this with multiple different vendors as their solution stack and as they're going through properly identifying and documenting. Because we still work with a lot of organizations that do it in the terms that we use now, the traditional route. An assessment, remediation, guidance. Once remediation is complete, we test it, make sure that our policies are being updated as we make those changes, and we have artifacts ready. So specific to Quick Track, what we aim to do is have our clients armed and ready, is probably the best way to explain it. So we're going to have our policy procedural documentations, our incident response, all that ready to go. If an audit is coming upon them, if they're doing a sole source type work, or for instance, like the Navy wants proof of remediation, not proof of compliance, it's not a paperwork game, do these things match? We'll schedule that time and we'll represent the client and saying, okay, we've got this ready. Those same clients that are dealing with those types of audits, and let's just think in terms of where this is going from CMMC, we want to have those things ready, updated constantly. We are constantly behind the scenes doing that type of testing that's needed to be able to meet your requirements and updating that paperwork so it's ready to go upon any type of audit that you have. And I know we have 1 more minute left, and I want to say this to everyone on the webinar here today. If you're working with a security firm and they want to charge you an exorbitant amount of money to do an assessment without asking basic proper questions from an educational standpoint, just be leery. Every single partner that we work with here, and there are more that we work with, and we're not afraid to share that type of information. It's about information sharing here. That's how we're going to win this battle. Proper scoping and having open forum conversations about where you're at, what you're trying to do. Every single partner that we have in here, from a technology partner all the way down to a service partner, we're going to have those calls. We're not going to charge you for it. We're trying to get you the solution that you need. And if QuickTrack isn't that solution, there are components that we can help guide you to, and that should not come with a price. We want to be that education side, and that's where we want to live on. So if there are folks out there that are on the security side, if you're a security company or a solution provider, and you want to be a part of a collaborative that can help solve these problems, because hey, let's talk about the numbers. There's 300,000 folks out there. Let's do this together, and if people are interested in talking about how we can do this together, don't hesitate to reach out as well. So just want to make sure I mention that.
Oh, thank you. All right, so we've come to the end. So a couple things just to wrap up here. Eric, great point there. So yes, we talked about this QuickTrack solution. It's not the only way that we help people as a collective group here, right? But it is a solution that exists now. It's been around. It works. If there's a different path you want to take, we want to help you. Obviously, we have the people that can get you on that journey and get you to where you need to be. So reach out, contact information's on there. A couple other things. The webinar that I referenced from April 17th, I will send that out with the thank you for coming email. And so be on the lookout for that. And then also the questions that were unanswered, again, you'll get that. You'll also get a recording of this once we're done. And if you have any other additional questions at all, please reach out and we will get them answered. So thank you again for joining. Thank you to our panelists. This is great content, great information. We'll be doing some more of these in the future, so please stay tuned. Follow us on LinkedIn, on social media channels and stuff. And I encourage you to do the same for everybody that was on here. Check out their websites and stuff, and we'll keep the conversations going and we'll get this done. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.